Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another fantastic live episode of Dream Business Radio. That's right, it's Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, and I'm your host, Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach, coming to you today from, kind of near, I guess, Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, we're moving around, so I'm kind of forgetting, actually. This is episode 604, and my special guest is Dan Tocchini. I think I said that right, Dan Tocchini. Dan, how you doing today?
Good, Jim. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm really excited. You and I connected, I literally think about 3 months ago, and then you had something come up in your family. Then I had something where I had no Wi-Fi. I don't even think I broadcasted that week, but now we're finally connecting. But folks, today we're going to be talking about change and leadership, both important topics. But anyway, let me introduce Dan, and we will dive right in. Dan Tocchini has been helping leaders bring some magic onto their teams for over 35 years. He's worked with executive teams from Interstate Batteries, ESPN, to Smarty Pants Vitamins, Impulse Space, as well as he's very active in the nonprofit space like Homeboy Industries and Defy Ventures. Dan gives a no-fluff approach, which is kind of how we connected, gives a no-fluff approach to helping transform leadership teams without any pixie dust, just courageous leadership. Sometimes people say Jim's tough love. I like courageous leadership. Sounds much more highbrow.
It's easier to swallow. That's swallow.
Right. Also, creative conflict resolution and relevant restructuring. No conversation is too difficult. Dan actually told me that when we connected a few minutes ago. Ask me anything you want. No question is too hard. No conversation too difficult. So, Dan, welcome again to Dream Business Radio. I'm really glad we connected here.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, Jim. Appreciate it. Nice intro. I like the way you're about the most natural I've ever heard read that. You made it your own, which was great.
Well, the secret is this is episode 604. I've been doing this a very long time. I've guested on over 300 podcasts. I've spoken on stages and done all. But the thing is, and so a little sidebar here. The job as a podcast host is to really make your guest look good, put them on a pedestal, so to speak, give them a really good platform. That's the job of the host. Sometimes you get on these shows and the host just wants to steal the spotlight from you. But the other thing, which is the second part of this, is, for goodness sakes, most people do provide intros, which is the right thing to do, but read it once before you go live.
At least once. That's right.
At least once. Just pretend, for heaven's sakes. Anyway, leadership is such an important topic. And I'm kind of figuring out where the question I always ask, you got me off track with your compliment, which I appreciate. So I always like to ask my guests, are you a first generation entrepreneur, Dan, or did you have parents or grandparents kind of show you what's possible besides the old W-2?
Yeah, I grew up with entrepreneurial parents. My grandfather was the first. He came over from Italy and settled here, and started grocery stores, and ended up starting the produce market in the early 1900s in San Francisco, and then opened up grocery stores in Northern California, in the Santa Rosa, Petaluma, Sebastopol area. And then he built a movie theater because he had real estate for some guys from New York who never showed up to open it. So he opened it. And he liked it so much, he sold the grocery stores and went into the movie business. So I grew up, running movie theaters and doing that kind of thing. My dad's still in that business. And when I wanted to go to college, my grandfather was like baffled. Like, I remember him saying to me,
"Why?
What are you doing? I give you a business. You want to go to college? But why? And I really had different interests, and my parents were really supportive, and I just went in a whole different direction. Well, they were breaking up right when I was getting out of school, so I was out on my own pretty early, and followed what I wanted to do. So, but always entrepreneurial. I think I've only worked for a couple organizations as an employee over my 50 years of employment.
Wow. So Dan, did your grandfather kind of show you all the things about the movie theater, like all the behind the scenes?
Oh, everything. Yeah. I was running a projection booth at 10, and then I was running a movie theater, the whole theater, at 12. Did that through high school. Learned how double entry book system, the whole deal. Inventory, payroll, balance the books every month. The whole deal. It was drilled into us.
Oh my gosh. So Dan, let's talk about leadership. I mean, it's it's becoming, I don't want to say sacred, but it seems to me that leadership is kind of one of those things that falls by the wayside, especially as companies grow rapidly and or they get into the, it's like sometimes say get one or two wheels in the soft shoulder. They start going through this, and then everything is kind of becomes survival mode, and leadership just takes a back seat. What's your experience with that?
Well, yeah, as an entrepreneur, when I started my own businesses, at a very young age, I realized if I was going to scale the business, if there's going to be at least any lifestyle in it that would be worth living, I needed to learn to lead, because if I just plugged people in like they were tools, they pretty much had their own agendas. And if their agendas didn't align with mine, then I've got competition in my own business. So I learned pretty early to make sure that what people wanted personally lined up with what I wanted professionally. And that surprisingly enough, that's the beginning of leadership, is to make sure, you're aligned with values and mission and vision, and that you have a like mindset when it comes to recognizing current reality. You're not afraid of looking at circumstances as they are and then impose what you want to have on top of it and say, okay, what's wanted and needed now to bring the vision I have into being, but you've really got to be willing to look at reality like that. And so, leadership is that's all leadership, Yeah. I don't think entrepreneurs often think that how much they're leading. I know they know they're leading because they're getting it done. But like you say, if I'm stuck in survival, I'm going to be reactive, not proactive. And I'm not going to think about what I can plant now that will serve the future of what I want to have happen. So that's probably the only downside of being ignorant to the, leadership and how it affects scaling.
Exactly. Somewhere on I don't know if it's on your website, I was doing about a half an hour prep this morning for the interview, and I saw somewhere, maybe it was either a quote or somebody said, we are all criminally minded. Where did I get that? And what do you mean by Now, who cares where I got it? If it's yours, what does that mean?
Well, meaning what I say is we're all criminal. Just some of us are more arrestable than others. In other words, we all have a tendency, we all know the aspects of ourselves that we cheat, where we cheat, how we cheat, where we lie, how we lie to ourselves, how we lie to others. Those are criminal acts. And so knowing that, I shouldn't be surprised when I hire somebody and I discover that they have certain tendencies that lean toward, being selfish and taking care, putting themselves ahead of the vision or the business, putting themselves ahead of other people in a way that's detrimental, not healthy. And I think we've all got that. And I think the quicker we come to terms with what that looks like for myself, then the more powerful I can be, because I can own it. It doesn't have to own me. I think that's the big thing. It's not like you ought not have it. It's not like you got to get rid of it. In fact, I'm with Carl Jung. You want to integrate that dark side, that shadow self, into your daily work, because it's where the power comes from. It's what informs me when I'm working with somebody and they're trying to take advantage of me. I can spot it, and I may be able to turn that into a possibility by how I engage it, rather than get taken advantage of, etc. So there's a number of benefits of integrating that aspect of my own personality. Yeah.
That really caught my attention. First of all, being a marketer and a branding guy, sometimes there's a way to say things which catches your attention, which is the first thing that has to happen, or they're not paying attention, right? So I like that, the criminal aspect of it. I think you said you could be criminal with yourself. I know a friend of mine, Lee Miltier's a big coach, and she says, not only do you have to be operate your business with integrity, you have to operate your business in integrity with yourself, right? Because you are the leader, especially in an entrepreneurial business, solo venture type thing.
Yeah. And that, if you think about it, if I'm out of integrity with myself, I'm out of my integrity with you. If I'm working with you, then I'm going to be lying to myself, and you're going to believe I'm going to portray myself as with intentions I don't really have. And then you're going to act on those. And then in that way, I'm criminal. And that way I'm lying to you without even, secondhand, by omission. And you're believing certain things are important to me, but they really aren't other things are important to me. I'm just saying that because that's what I think you want to hear. And that's the beginning of the end. That's probably the most innocuous, but also can be the most poisonous criminal kind of act there is.
Right. I don't think there's any organization, even solopreneurs, because in those cases you got the best boss and the worst boss. But in every organization, Dan, there's going to be conflict. It's
Yeah.
impossible to avoid it. Now, another thing I wrote down to ask you about, you say conflict is the yellow brick road to success. Please explain.
Yeah, sure. So let's do. If you're going to have an organization, you have more than one person, you have diversity. You start having a diverse spectrum of perspective, and you have a diverse spectrum of ideas and insights and knowledge and experience. So usually when we get into those, you have that going on. And if everybody starts to care about the same thing, they're going to have different ideas about how to accomplish that one thing. And that's going to represent a type of conflict that is worthy if it's engaged with some sense of intention. Like if I'm intentional when I engage my conflict, I can find in the conflict the very essence of what's needed to go through whatever's stopping us. Inevitably, what happens is we're committed to something. It's not turning out. Something broke down. We want to talk about it. We sit down and start to do some forensics, and we start diagnosing the problem and separating it from the symptom. And then we get to the place and we say, okay, there's 3 different ideas about how to handle it. Now we're going to have, there's going to be conflict all along that path, but that conflict is worth it because it sharpens. And there's conflict that's worth engaging, and then there's conflict that's not worth engaging. And I think that's probably a leader's most vital skill, is knowing what conflict is worth engaging and when to engage it, and prioritizing, like, what problems do we solve first, and engage the conflict around those problems. And there's some frameworks people can use to do that.
Yeah, and you're right. That is the leader's responsibility. But at what point does the leader say, I need to bring in an outside person like a Dan, a Dan Tocchini? When do I bring in a consultant? In a way, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's like working with a therapist. Sometimes you need a neutral voice to bring 2 people together. In an organization, I mean, for a short time, I was working with a consulting company, and one time we're in this. I went with the owner, the actual consultant, and we're sitting at this long table, and on one side was like the sales and marketing team, the people who are driving ads and going out and closing business. On the other side was fulfillment, right? Installers, customer service, and they're complaining, we can't get it done. And they're saying, well, you don't give us. It's like this constant battle, yet they're all in the same team.
Yeah. Well, it's, you got to chunk it down. You got to say, okay, what are they usually let me get to the question.
Yep.
So why somebody would engage us or engage my organization, myself, or any one of our partners or consultants is because they've probably got a pathological problem. In other words, there's 3 forms of problems. There's normal, abnormal, and pathological problems. And the ones you want to solve are abnormal and pathological. And you can't tell if they're abnormal or pathological without taking into consideration the context the problem arose in. So if you and I, Jim, started a business in the first year, we had some cash flow issues, that's normal.
Yeah.
Right. But if we've been in business for 5 years and we keep having cash flow problems, that's abnormal and probably pathological and worth some forensic, to look into it.
Just tell me a little bit further on pathological. I mean, I think pathological liar, somebody can't help themselves. They just keep lying. What do you mean in this case?
Yeah. Pathological liars, they can help themselves. They don't, because they indulge it, right? They don't want to exercise. They don't want to have the power over it because it gets them what they want. And usually there's a deep fear or neurosis behind that. But so what was the question again?
No, I just wanted to go deep on pathological, but
pathological. It's a system of, think of it as a systematic strategy for engaging situations that represent a threat to me in some way, to my survival. Okay. A threat to me looking good, feeling good, being right, or feeling in control. if I'm afraid, if I'm not willing to get vulnerable to what and investigate my thinking when I feel like that, then I'm going to get pathological in protecting myself and the organization from what looks like a threat. And what
I'm just curious.
and the problem. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm always mindful of the clock. I'm just curious, when you go into an organization and you work a lot with, larger companies, not the small entrepreneurial companies that I usually work with. But let's say you go into a company and the leader brings you in, CEO or whoever. Is that a sign that they're willing to be vulnerable, or do they
Yeah.
often see the problem out here and I need your help to fix it?
It's usually a combination of both. It's
Okay.
also, you can be like, we go into a normal engagement for us is usually a 6-month or a year contract to solve specific problems. And then we bring different things to use. But what tends to happen is the owner tends to, they're struggling with something they can't overcome, and they realize what's at stake, and they don't think they have the time, like they need to get there quicker. So they'll bring us in. And then what we'll do is we'll come in and do some forensics to understand the problem, because most of the time owners will bring us symptoms that they call the problem, and they're getting tangled up in the symptoms, and they're not getting back to the problems. One of our taglines is all business problems are people problems.
Okay.
And so, and that people don't, and most leaders want to just think that it's a strategic issue, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I can't remember, I think it was one of these CEOs that said that, famous CEOs, but it's really true. Culture eats, strategy for breakfast. So you can come in with a great strategy, but if you've got a conflicted team, or a team that's at odds with each other, or siloed, and they're stonewalling each other, no strategy is going to be able to break that down, and no strategy will survive that. That's why, when strategies meet reality, you find out what the character of the team is and the leadership is. Because no strategy, you have a strategy, and what you find out is what you need to adjust in the current reality to get that strategy in place. And that's a series of conversations and creating an understanding and engaging people. And if you haven't done that, then you're going to find yourself bouncing off your culture and not understanding why you're not effective.
Now, did you say strategy eats culture, or culture eats strategy?
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
And what do you mean by that? I mean, it's such an interesting,
Yeah.
culture eats strategy. So there's bad culture in a business, may not start out that way, but I guess it could grow, develop, kind of like a cancer, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Think of culture as a conversation.
Okay.
So, and that, when I say conversation, I mean more than words. I mean, the things you do communicate certain things. So let's say you go into a culture that people don't want. I have a client, a very large client I work with now. One of the things we're intervening with is the lack of communication. That's the symptom between departments, and this is a high-tech company. So if they don't communicate and they launch something, it usually breaks down because they miss things and they're not aligned, and they have different ideas of what should come out. And so what we found was that their executive team was doing what's called peer reviews instead of talking. And then and yet they met every week, and they try to have the meeting be all about executing strategy. Then they'd leave the meeting and backbite each other, or talk negative with their team about each other, which caused resistance. So the teams didn't want to communicate with other teams because they didn't want to engage their, the potential conflict that they thought was there, or they wouldn't be listened to, etc. So necessary details don't get communicated, and things you perform at a much lower level, and it costs the company a ton. So when we came in there, we broke that up. We started to look, let's sit down and find out what you don't want to talk about. And most of what they didn't want to talk about is where the gold was. It's where the most important things needed to be vetted and then remedied. And 90% of breakdowns, this is not me speaking, this is Harvard and different business schools have done studies. 90% of breakdowns in business are cognitive. There are things that are happening between the team members and what they're thinking about what's going on. If you react to a threat, the sense of threat, every time it comes up or quickly, you're going to miss opportunity, because opportunity presents itself initially as a threat. It's outside your comfort zone. It's calling you into something you haven't been, but you see the possibility, but you may feel like a threat because it's going to open up a vulnerability you probably hadn't experienced or have been navigating away from. And then you're in a bind. How do I assess the asymmetries? How do I get at this possibility? How do I help my team get at this possibility? Because they're going to be carrying the same prejudice. I will have indoctrinated them into my fears, and they know that this is not something to touch if I'm leading the team.
When you get called in as a consultant, I'm just curious if the average, most probably CEOs hire you, COOs, I'm guessing it's that level, right? Do they recognize there's a culture problem, or they just see there's some kind of crap going on here?
They recognize that the problem they have is affecting their unit somehow, their business, the bottom line. It's affecting their enjoyment and satisfaction at work. They haven't been able to get over it. They know it's something they need to get through if they want to get to whatever's next or to their mission. And they have tried in their mind everything, and they don't know what to do.
Okay.
And usually when you're in that place where you say, I've tried everything. Well, what's true is you've tried everything you see is possible.
That you know of. Yeah.
That's right. And because human beings, we're just human beings. We always make the best choice we see possible. So even if it's not the best choice available, the best choice available might look like a threat. So I make a choice that's less effective, but it looks more conducive to what I want. So and that's probably the biggest. We can put language on that. We can help people see it. We can depersonalize it, and then we can act into it.
My biggest problem as a host for this podcast for so long, I'm 10 questions down the road, and I've got clocks ticking. So many things I want to ask you. So
Go ahead.
I want to ask you something that might be slightly off topic, but I'm really curious. And if I'm curious, I think my audience is curious. So you said the average engagement about 10, 15 minutes ago was 6 to 12 months. When me being in the entrepreneurial space, I know that time spans and attention spans and expectations, they're rapidly changing. People think you can snap your finger and fix something. Yeah. Maybe you can affect change in an entrepreneurial company a lot faster than a giant corporation. But my question is, when you come in, are they looking for a quick fix, the average company? And when do you break it to them that it's going to be 6 to 12 months? Or do you say we're going to go as fast as we can, but it takes that long? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we usually come in and say, look, we won't know how long this is going to take until we won't have any idea until we really scope it. However, usually we can because when we come in, we bring a team of people in, not just to analyze the problem, but to execute with the team that hires us. We know probably most of the answers are in them. So one of our senior partners is an ex-McKinsey guy, and unlike McKinsey, which they're unbelievable, but they're very much a strategic consulting firm. They don't like to do integration. We specialize in integration.
Okay.
So there's a difference there. So if we're working with your team, we're usually, if the problem isn't solved, it's pretty much on its way, and you can see light at the end of the tunnel, usually after 6 months. But along the way, we're assessing and discussing it. 6 months is and a year, depending on the initiative, we'll say, look, this is going to take a year. We might be able to get you there in 6 months, and you guys do the rest. Right. I mean, that's
in the grand scheme of things, Dan, and looking backwards, if you fix it, 6 months to a year is not a long time.
Yeah.
From my perspective, being in sales and helping other entrepreneurs in the sales arena, it's like if you've ever been to a therapist or, a doctor of some sort, and I have no idea how long this would take. In your mind, as the customer, you're thinking, God, could this take am I going to be in this chair for 10 years, And
yeah, right.
you do want to make some what's worked well for me, and again, entrepreneurial, if you can get somebody over the hump of getting started and get them some early wins, right? Whether
That's right.
that's 90 days or whatever, the comfort level
Yeah,
increases, the potential for
incredibly.
buyer's remorse goes down, and then you're off to the races. But it's that initial, no, it's going to take a year. That I just
Oh, I
wanted to,
got
in
it.
the
And most of our clients keep us around for 3 to 5. We were with ESPN for 8 years. It went from one. We went in there right when they were merging with Disney, and then we went from
okay.
one project to another. They just because we were successful in one, they got us into another, and pretty soon they referred us over to Disney, and then we spent 8 years at Disney, off and on in different projects, right? So,
And if you
and then,
bring value, that's the way it usually goes. But it's
yeah,
closing the gap between, I think I want to work with you, but I don't know if I want to work with you that long. But once you get
exactly.
engaged, so anyway, we got about 4 minutes. I want to ask you another question,
Sure.
because you're very skilled at helping people prepare for difficult conversations. What can you share with my audience on that?
Well, they don't need a pen because this is recorded, but there are there's a framework that we use, and the key is first you need to prepare for the conversation. If you have a difficult conversation to have, it's conflicted, and there's a lot at stake. Notice how much time you take to prepare for it. It's not just sitting in the car thinking about what you want to talk about. You want to sit down and you want to identify the issue in your language, in your words. What is the issue? And you want to state it. So we tell people, state the issue the best you can, as clear as you can. Even use ChatGPT; it'll help you even get clearer, right? Then, once you're clear about the issue and you've got it stated, show and provide an example where you'd say, yeah, here's the issue in an example. And when you give an example and you state the issue, that'll help you even get clearer. You might, even after you state the example, you might revamp how you framed the issue. And then I'd write down after that, the third step is talk about what you experience when this issue comes up. I get upset. I want to back off, or I want to go in there and put my hands on it, take it away from you, or, I just get frustrated and I shut down, whatever. What do I feel? What do I do? Right. And then I would talk about how the next thing is number 4, how have you contributed to this problem? What have you done or not done that has helped keep this issue in place? All right. Now, and then I would talk about the next step, 5th step. If this continues, here's what I believe is at stake. And now you want to build the parade of horribles. Because that's what motivates me. Every human being is 5 times more motivated to stop something from happening than they are to have something new happen. So if you want to have something new first, you have to stop what's been happening up to then, and you want to get a good sense of what's at stake in 6 months, a year, 2 years, if we continue in this state. And then I would say, look, here's my proposal after that. I'd say, here's what I'd like to do about it, but I'd like to hear also what you have to do it. Now, if I prepare all of that before I go in, I'm much more calm. The conversation could go in different ways, but I know what to come back to. I know what I'm there to talk about. And the information I get in the conversation will add to what I'm saying. It'll open up new possibilities, but at least I'm on track and I know what I'm committed to have happen by the end of it.
Got it. I don't know if you know this or not. You'd be a hell of a copywriter. You got such a way with the phrases, parade of horribles.
Yeah.
In general terms, in marketing, you state the problem, you agitate it, like if there's a parade of horribles, and then you offer a solution. Those are the 3 steps of great marketing,
That's
right?
right.
And it's kind of what you just described, much more eloquently than I did. But parade of horribles, that's so great.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to be a fun interview, Dan. Thank you so much. I know your website is takenewground.com. Is that where people can connect with you, or?
There, Instagram, Dan_Tocchini. And then we have a podcast. Now we're on a hiatus till the end of summer because we're doing some expansion work. But we have 200 episodes on this podcast, the design for small businesses. because we do a lot of work with large companies and the problems are usually very similar. This is a way for them to get some background. It's called the Naked Leadership Podcast, and it's on Spotify and Apple. Yeah.
My friend and coaching client Jeff Herring is, as he says, a recovering therapist. He goes, he'd be a hell of a good therapist too. Well, actually, that's true, because I mean, that's what you are when you're a consultant. I kind of said that earlier haphazardly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're dealing with people's psychology, right? And in this case, it's the psychology of action. You know, we're the psychology of performance, and
yes.
and my background is in that field. So.
Well, this is great. Well, I forgot to mention up front, I didn't want to interrupt our train, but Dan is coming to us from 5,000 acres in Idaho, where they grow their own food, homeschool their kids. I don't know if they have a distillery on board or not, but
we can't. I'd have to kill you if I told you that.
I know. I'm just having fun. Dan, I'm so glad our schedules finally aligned. This has been great.
Me too.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor having you on Dream Business Radio.
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Hey, folks, that wraps up a very special interview with Dan Tocchini, Tocchini, in case you're curious. And you can connect with him on Instagram, takenewground.com. Definitely a skilled guy. We thank him for being on. You can connect with me at getjimpalmer.com. That's where all things in Planet Jim reside. But that's it. Until this time next week, another fantastic interview. I am Captain Jim Palmer, and I'm the Dream Business Coach. You take good care.